Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with how two college dropouts selling circuit boards set the stage for one of the biggest, most dominant companies in human history. Welcome to the deep dive.
It's truly remarkable. Today, we are attempting to summarize a corporation whose entire trajectory spans, what, 5 decades of technological upheaval, political maneuvering, near-death
And
experiences.
continuous reinvention.
Exactly. We're talking about Apple Inc. It started as a classic startup drama and has, well, it's evolved into a multi-trillion-dollar economic entity that fundamentally shapes global commerce and increasingly global policy.
And we have a massive stack of comprehensive source material covering every single pivot, from the 1976 founding through the financial and product architecture of the current Cook era, all the way to major corporate challenges projected for late 2025.
Our deep dive here is specifically tailored for you, the curious learner who needs the fast track to being truly well-informed. We really need to do three things. First, distill the historical pivots, those existential choices, those near-death experiences that, forced radical change.
Right.
Second, we must analyze the vast scope of their current product and services ecosystem, which is really the foundation of their market dominance.
And
And finally, we have to really dive deep into the complex corporate issues, from environmental goals to global supply chain controversies that characterize a $4 trillion entity.
it's a mission that requires cutting through the myth and getting to the strategic reality. So let's rewind to the beginning, back to 1976, and examine how Apple survived its own early successes.
The Apple origin story is famous, almost mythical, but the early details. They reveal the initial strategic DNA of the company. It started as Apple Computer Company on April 1st, 1976.
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day, right. And you had the three co-founders, Steve Jobs, the demanding visionary and, relentless marketer, Steve Wozniak, the pure engineering genius who just loved building things,
And Ronald Wayne.
and Ronald Wayne, who was brought in to handle documentation and administrative tasks.
And Ronald Wayne, in perhaps the most famous case of what if in financial history, sold his stake just 12 days after co-founding.
That's right. Wayne had a 10% share, which he sold back to Jobs and Wozniak for a mere $800.
$800.
Just $800. Plus a guarantee of $1,500 later for formally withdrawing his name from the venture. He was worried about the personal financial liability if the nascent company failed.
I mean, you can kind of see his point at the time.
You can, but it's the ultimate cautionary tale that illustrates the high-stakes, high-risk nature of early-stage venture capital. That 10% stake would eventually be worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
The first physical product was the Apple I. It was pure Wozniak, an assembled circuit board kit. You, the customer, still had to supply the keyboard, the monitor, the power supply.
A whole case. It was a hobbyist machine.
Exactly, and it was sold for a memorably odd price, $666.66.
And our sources confirm Wozniak chose that price purely because he liked repeating digits. It's a little insight into his personality.
The machine that truly launched the company, however, wasn't the Apple I.
No, it was the Apple II, introduced in 1977. This machine was a monumental success for two critical reasons. First, it offered color graphics, which immediately differentiated it from the stark, black and white displays of most competitors.
And the second great...
Second, and this is more important for its long-term viability, it featured an open architecture.
That open architecture is key. Today, we talk about the walled garden, but the early Apple was an open field. Why was that so vital?
It allowed third-party hardware and software developers to just flourish. The Apple II became the platform for the first true business killer application.
VisiCalc.
VisiCalc.
Yeah.
It was the first spreadsheet program released in 1979. And it was revolutionary because it allowed businesses to model financial data instantly, replacing days of manual calculations.
So VisiCalc wasn't just a successful piece of software. It strategically transformed the Apple II. It took it from being a cool hobbyist device into a necessary, critical tool for offices, schools, and small businesses.
Right, and that demand drove staggering growth. Our source material shows that between 1977 and 1980, yearly sales shot up from, $75,000 to $118 million.
Wow.
That rapid success led to the massive IPO in 1980 on the NASDAQ. It was a huge event, raising over $100 million in capital, which is the largest IPO since Ford Motor Company in 1956.
And it created an instant class of millionaires.
It did. This single day created approximately 300 instant millionaires, solidifying Apple's status as a corporate phenomenon.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The shift from the Apple II to the GI revolution and the internal power struggles that followed.
Right, the foundational aha moment happened when Jobs and several Apple engineers visited Xerox PRC, the Palo Alto Research Center, in 1979.
That visit was a masterstroke of trading future value for immediate access.
It really was. Apple negotiated the right to see Xerox's pioneering work on the graphical user interface, the GI and the mouse, in exchange for $1 million worth of Apple's pre-IPO shares.
And Jobs saw it and immediately got it.
Immediately. He recognized the immense potential of what he saw. He realized that the future of computing wasn't command lines, but intuitive interaction.
That led directly to the development of two pivotal products: the unsuccessful Lisa in 1983, and of course the much more famous Macintosh in 1984.
And Jobs was determined to launch the Mac with pure spectacle. He succeeded with the 1984 advertisement.
An ad that became a cultural phenomenon.
Oh, completely.
Hmm.
Directed by Ridley Scott, it cost $1.5 million and aired during the Super Bowl. It was a piece of cinematic art that cast Apple as the revolutionary hero, smashing the conformity of Big Brother,
Which everyone knew was IBM.
which was widely understood to be IBM, the established computer giant.
The genius of that ad is that they sold the idea of defiance and creativity, not the computer itself. It established a brand ethos rooted in anti-establishment cool.
It did.
Yeah.
Yet the Mac almost immediately stumbled, which is the massive irony here.
Why did it stumble?
The initial sales tapered off dramatically after the first 3 months. The problem was twofold: price and performance. Jobs had controversially mandated only 128 kilobytes of RAM.
To keep costs down.
To keep the bill of materials lower, yes. But even with that limitation, the Mac still launched at $2,495.
Which in today's money is.
It's almost $7,600 today. So critics rightfully called it sluggish, limited, and just way too expensive for the mass market.
That sales slump and the internal politics triggered the inevitable power struggle. Jobs had famously recruited John Sculley from Pepsi.
With that legendary line, do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugar water, or do you want a chance to change the world?
The irony is that in 1985, the man Jobs hired, Sculley, removed him as head of the Macintosh division.
Which led Jobs to resign and found NXT.
And he wasn't the only one to leave.
No, he wasn't alone. Wozniak also quit active employment that same year. He cited deep frustration with how the company was treating the Apple II division, which was, still generating massive profits, but was being ignored in favor of the Mac.
So the core problem wasn't just Jobs' personality. It was an organizational paralysis stemming from internal conflict and poor strategic focus.
Absolutely. And the post-Jobs 1990s were characterized by strategic decline and product fragmentation. The central failing strategy was the high-right policy.
Can you define that for us and explain why it was so detrimental?
The high-right policy was championed by an executive named Jean-Louis Gasset. It was a strategy focused ruthlessly on maintaining extremely high profit margins, often summarized by the slogan, 55 or die.
55% margins.
Aiming for 55% margins on products like the Macintosh II. The consequence was that Apple completely abandoned the mid-market. By focusing exclusively on the high end, they allowed Windows and inexpensive PC clones to completely dominate the growing mass consumer and business markets.
And the result was catastrophic.
It was. It led to the first ever period of declining sales during the crucial Christmas season of 1989. And adding to the market confusion, they flooded the zone with confusing, often identical products marketed across 3 brands, Quadra, Centris, and Performa.
So the customer just had no idea what they were buying or why.
None. And let's not overlook the string of costly, unsuccessful flops during this era, driven by unrealistic market forecasts from leadership like Sculley.
Right, they had digital cameras.
Digital cameras like the QuickTake, CD players, the Pippin video game console, and the famously problematic Newton tablet.
The Newton, a symbol of the era.
It really was. Technologically impressive in some ways, but plagued by its high price and, its unreliable handwriting recognition. It just became a symbol of the company's aimless experimentation.
All the while, the Microsoft threat became existential. Windows gained massive market share by focusing on providing the operating system for inexpensive, mass-produced PCs.
And Apple's long and ultimately unsuccessful lawsuit against Microsoft, alleging the similarity of Windows GUI did nothing to stop the bleeding in market share.
So by the mid-90s, the company was technically profitable but strategically bankrupt, nearing an actual cash crisis.
That's right. And the biggest internal failure was the realization that the original Mac OS just could not be modernized. It lacked basic features like preemptive multitasking and protected memory that the competition had.
And the projects have fixed this.
Projects like Pink and Copland, they were expensive, multi-year failures.
So they desperately needed a modern operating system. They almost acquired BIOS for $125 million.
They did, but those talks stalled when the CEO, who was a former Apple executive, Jean-Louis Gasset, another layer of irony, demanded $300 million.
That stalled negotiation was the ultimate Hail Mary pass moment.
It was. Instead, in late 1996, Apple purchased NextXT, the company Jobs had founded, for $400 million.
And this acquisition was primarily for the technology.
Primarily for the Next Step operating system technology, which was based on solid BSD Unix foundations. It was expensive, but it guaranteed Jobs' return as an advisor, paving the way for the most critical turnaround in corporate history.
The return of Jobs in 1997 didn't just bring back a visionary, it brought back a ruthless editor.
Right. He quickly moved from advisor to interim CEO, staging a boardroom coup that resulted in CEO Gil Amelio's resignation.
And his first acts were immediate and decisive.
And painful. He executed major cuts to pare down the offerings, canceling 70% of all models and laying off 3,000 employees. He believed simplicity was the key to survival, replacing that confusing quadra, centrist, performa mess with a clear, focused strategy.
He also made an incredible strategic and political move that shocked the industry. He convinced Microsoft to invest $150 million.
It was a brilliant piece of business theater.
On the surface, it seemed like a truce between sworn enemies. What was the deeper strategy behind that cash injection?
Well, our sources suggest it had two goals. First, it immediately bolstered Apple's critically low cash reserves. Second, and maybe more importantly, it was widely seen in the industry as an antitrust insurance policy for Microsoft.
Because Microsoft was under investigation by the DOJ at the time.
Exactly. They were facing a massive antitrust case, and demonstrating that they were investing in their biggest competitor provided a political shield. Jobs took the cash and the political favor, prioritizing survival over maintaining a rivalry.
And Jobs clearly wanted to signal a complete break from the flailing management of the 90s.
He did. He physically donated Apple's internal library and historical archives to Stanford, explicitly stating he wanted the entire company to focus solely on the present and the future, unburdened by past failures.
He also ended the Mac clone deals.
Right, effectively buying back the largest clone maker, Power Computing. And he relaunched the online store with a build-to-order manufacturing model, very similar to Dell's Efficient system.
And the market responded immediately.
It did. By the end of his first year back, Apple reported a $309 billion profit. The turnaround was immediate and measurable.
Then came the product that visually redefined the company, the iMac in 1998.
A massive hit. It sold 800,000 units in the first 5 months. This product wasn't just a colorful box. It heralded 3 key shifts in the entire PC industry.
Okay, what were they?
First, it was an early and total adopter of the USB connector, which forced the industry standard. Second, and notoriously, it completely abandoned the 3.5-inch floppy diskette.
A huge gamble that paid off.
A massive gamble, yes. And third, it came pre-installed with built-in internet connectivity, emphasizing the ease of getting online. This focus on internet accessibility is what gave us the now iconic I in iMac.
Which stood for Internet.
It stood for Internet, though later the company retrospectively defined it as also meaning individual, imagination, and innovation.
And critically, this product was the work of Jonathan Ive, the design lead who would become Jobs' closest collaborator, introducing a level of minimalist, colorful design that the industry had never seen.
With that success, Jobs established the famous 4-product quadrant that governed Apple for years.
2 desktops, 2 laptops.
Exactly. 2 desktops. The iMac for consumers, the PowerMac G3 for pros, and 2 laptops. The iBook for consumers, the PowerBook G3 for pros. The mantra was simplicity and quality over sheer volume and fragmentation.
And at the same time, they were building the digital media portfolio.
Right. Jobs recognized that the PC was no longer just a calculator. It was becoming the digital hub, the central repository for all your creative output.
This led to a series of strategic acquisitions to build out that software ecosystem.
Yep. Final Cut Pro for professional video editing, iMovie for consumers, and the technology that led to both the professional DVD Studio Pro and the consumer iDVD.
And iTunes.
And crucially, they acquired SoundJam MP, which they simplified and aggressively promoted, renaming it iTunes in 2000. This software ecosystem was the foundation of the walled garden they would later build.
The period immediately following 2001 is perhaps the most critical for Apple's long-term dominance because it involved three major pivots that expanded the company far beyond the PC market.
Yes, three huge pivots. Let's start with the technical one, Mac OS X.
This was the fulfillment of the NXT acquisition.
It was. Launched in March 2001, it married the stability and security of a Unix system, specifically based on the Mach kernel and BSD Unix, with a beautiful, modern user interface.
Why was this technically necessary?
Because Unix is inherently more stable. It introduced preemptive multitasking, meaning the OS could prioritize tasks instead of waiting for an application to willingly release control of the CPU. It also introduced protected memory.
Meaning if one app crashed.
It couldn't take the entire operating system down with it. This was the fix for the fatal flaws of the old Mac OS.
The second pivot was physical, the Apple stores.
Right. The first two retail locations opened in May 2001. A lot of media outlets speculated they would fail, dismissing the idea that a computer manufacturer could successfully run specialty retail.
But they succeeded spectacularly. They became known for the customer experience, the iconic flagship architecture,
Those huge glass cubes and staircases.
and of course, the Genius Bar.
The Genius Bar was the real retail genius. It was about creating high-quality, reliable, one-on-one service that no PC competitor could match. This retail presence became the fastest retailer in history to reach $1 billion in annual sales,
It gave them complete control over the customer experience.
something they prioritize above almost all else.
And the third pivot was the complete game changer that forced the company to change its name, the iPod.
Debuted in October 2001, it was immediately a massive success, famously sold over 100 million units within 6 years. It established the paradigm of the device being tethered to a central piece of software, iTunes, laying the groundwork for the future ecosystem strategy.
That dominance accelerated with the launch of the iTunes Store in 2003.
Selling legal music downloads for 99 cents a song. This was a critical political and strategic move. It legitimized the digital music market, offering the major record labels a secure, legal revenue stream and cementing Apple's control over digital media consumption.
And it became the world's largest music retailer.
Within 2 years, yes. It accumulated over 5 billion downloads by 2008.
Technologically, the next huge shift was the Intel transition in 2005-2006. Apple announced they were moving their entire Mac product line from IBM's PowerPC chips to Intel processors.
And this transition, which they completed over a year sooner than announced, demonstrated renewed operational agility.
Why was this strategically vital?
It allowed Macs to run Windows via virtualization software, suddenly making the Mac a viable option for professionals trapped in PC-centric environments. It also provided a crucial jump in processor speed and thermal efficiency.
And it was a massive financial success.
It was. It allowed Apple to surpass Dell's market capitalization in 2006. That was the moment Jobs famously reminded employees of Michael Dell's 1997 suggestion that Apple should be shut down and the money returned to shareholders.
With the iPod and iTunes defining the digital landscape, the name needed to change. In 2007, reflecting the company's expansion far beyond just computers, Apple Computer Inc. was formally renamed Apple Inc.
And that renaming was announced concurrently with the launch of the iPhone in 2007.
A device immediately hailed as a game changer.
It was. Sold 270,000 units in the first 30 hours. More than just a successful phone, the iPhone is critically credited with creating the app economy by establishing the core software and hardware platform for third-party developers.
The launch of the App Store in 2008 monetized that new economy instantly.
Oh, instantly. Designed to sell third-party applications, it rapidly registered an average daily revenue of $1 million. By October 2008, Apple had secured its position as the third-largest mobile handset supplier globally, a staggering leap from a company that was nearly bankrupt a decade earlier.
The final major product category established under Jobs' active tenure was the iPad.
Unveiled in 2010, it ran the same touch-based operating system as the iPhone and sold 500,000 units in the first week. It immediately defined the tablet category, forcing competitors to scramble to catch up.
This era of exponential growth concluded in 2011. Jobs took medical leave, and 2 months later, in August 2011, Tim Cook officially succeeded him as CEO.
And the end of that year marked the end of the Jobs era, but the foundation for the next decade of scaling was firmly in place.
The transition under Tim Cook was marked by continuity and vision, but a massive increase in operational efficiency, supply chain mastery.
And, crucially, scaling the ecosystem globally.
Initially, the product scaling focused on iterating the mobile devices. The iPhone 4s introduced Siri, a voice assistant that was revolutionary at the time.
The iPhone 5 saw record pre-orders, and new devices across the board, from MacBooks to iPads, adopted the high-resolution Retina displays. The iPad mini, introduced in 2012, cemented the strategy of offering multiple form factors to capture different parts of the tablet market.
Cook also emphasized vertical integration and education.
Following Jobs' stated desire to reinvent the textbook industry, Apple launched iBooks, Textbooks, and iBooks Author in 2012. This was an attempt to transform the expensive static textbook market into a dynamic digital environment.
And in 2014, we saw a critical strategic acquisition that foreshadowed the focus on services. The purchase of Beats Electronics for $3 billion.
The largest acquisition in company history at the time.
Why $3 billion for a headphone company?
Well, it wasn't just about the headphones. That acquisition was primarily a strategic move to immediately bolster Apple Music, the streaming service they were planning to launch.
It brought in key talent.
Exactly. It brought in Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, who had deep ties to the music industry and understood the culture. It was an investment in brand cachet and industry connections that was necessary to enter the competitive streaming market against giants like Spotify.
The Cook era is fundamentally defined by expanding into new hardware categories that rely entirely on the existing user base.
The Apple Watch, introduced in 2014, is a perfect case study in product evolution.
How so?
Initially, the watch was marketed as a fashion accessory and a simple iPhone complement. However, our sources show that its strategy gradually shifted dramatically to focus almost exclusively on health and fitness features.
So it's not just against other smartwatches, but against medical devices.
Right. It strategically positions it against dedicated medical monitoring and activity trackers, creating a lucrative new revenue stream tied to personal well-being.
And the sheer scale of the famous walled garden is what truly underpins their financial dominance now.
Absolutely. Apple exceeded 1 billion active devices globally by 2016, and that number surpassed 2 billion by early 2023. That enormous, sticky, installed user base is the reliable foundation of their services revenue growth.
Internally, there was a subtle but important moment of managerial clarity in 2019, the cancellation of the AirPower wireless charger.
This was the first device cancellation under Cook's leadership. It demonstrated an operational maturity, a willingness to cut a flawed product, even one that had been heavily marketed, if it couldn't meet Apple's stringent quality and engineering standards.
But the most profound technological pivot under Cook has been the Apple Silicon era.
Without a doubt. In 2020, Apple announced the shift from relying on external Intel x86 chips to developing their own in-house ARM processors, Apple Silicon.
What did this transition mean for the company's long-term strategy?
This move was a pure play on vertical integration. By designing the chip, the operating system, and the application software, Apple gained unparalleled control over the entire system.
Which allowed them to optimize performance.
And power efficiency to a degree that was impossible when relying on Intel's roadmap. The first M1 Max shipped that November, demonstrating a performance leap that stunned the industry.
And this chip revolution had a massive strategic benefit beyond just raw speed, didn't it?
Absolutely. Industry analysts noted that the move left Apple significantly better prepared for the COVID-19-induced global semiconductor shortage. Because Apple was developing and manufacturing their chips in a closed loop, they had greater leverage and predictability in securing the necessary components.
Leading to increased profitability when competitors were struggling.
Right. And the success was so evident, it inspired other major corporations like Tesla and Amazon to accelerate their own in-house chip development paths.
Looking ahead, the newest hardware category is the mixed reality space.
This arrived with the announcement of the Apple Vision Pro headset in June 2023, running the new Vision OS operating system, which then launched in February 2024. This signals the company's belief that the next paradigm of computing will move beyond the two-dimensional screen.
And as we move into 2024 and 2025, the central theme is AI.
It is. Apple introduced Apple Intelligence in June 2024. This is a critical distinction as it focuses heavily on on-device artificial intelligence capabilities.
Meaning computations are performed directly on the device.
Exactly. This enhances speed and, crucially, maintains user privacy by not sending sensitive data to the cloud unnecessarily.
That focus on integrated AI was reinforced in November 2024 with the strategic acquisition of Pixelmator, a company renowned for its AI-driven image editing applications.
A very clear signal.
Yeah.
This demonstrates a deep commitment to integrating AI directly into core creative software, rather than just treating it as a peripheral feature.
We're also seeing a massive focus on domestic investment.
Which is a key response to the political and regulatory climate. In 2025, Apple announced its largest investment initiative to date, committing over $500 billion in the U.S. over 4 years.
And that includes a new manufacturing facility in Houston.
Right, specifically for servers supporting the Apple Intelligence infrastructure and expanding R&D in areas like advanced silicon engineering. This move has significant economic and political implications.
Software design also saw a major overhaul in 2025. They introduced the liquid glass design language and unified system updates.
A necessary move to address mounting internal and external criticism that the software interfaces had become fragmented and inconsistent across the massive ecosystem of iPhones, iPads, Macs, and the Vision Pro.
Yet, despite these massive investments and technological leaps, 2025 proved to be challenging.
It did. Services revenue hit an all-time high, cementing their strategic shift. But the stock value saw a steep 19% decline year-to-date, reflecting market concerns about future growth rates.
And they're still grappling with ongoing antitrust investigations.
By the U.S. Department of Justice, yes. And the competitive landscape in the AI space, from companies like Google and OpenAI, is heating up rapidly.
It seems like the Cook era is about managing phenomenal scale while trying to successfully pivot to the next paradigm AI and mixed reality, all under intense global scrutiny.
When we talk about Apple today, we are talking about a scale of wealth and influence that is, well, it's hard to comprehend. They became the first publicly traded U.S. company valued over $1 trillion in 2018.
And the growth hasn't stopped. As of October 2025, our sources confirm the company's valuation reached just over $4 trillion. $4 trillion.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that number. And to contextualize their operational engine, their total revenue in 2024 was $391 billion.
That staggering revenue figure reveals the importance of the revenue mix, which defines their current strategy.
It does. The iPhone remains the undisputed powerhouse, accounting for nearly half of total revenue. It is the core financial driver and the gateway to the ecosystem.
However, the rapidly expanding services segment is paramount for Wall Street's current valuation of the company. Services comprised 26% of revenue in 2024. Why is 26% of revenue so strategically important?
It's all about predictability and margin. Services revenue, which includes iCloud subscriptions, Apple Music, App Store fees, and warranty programs, is highly recurring, predictable, and carries an exceptionally high profit margin.
Often exceeding 70%.
Exactly. Wall Street values these recurring, sticky revenue streams far more highly than volatile hardware sales, which are dependent on cyclical upgrades.
And the rest of the revenue?
It's split among wearables, home, and accessories at 10%, Mac at 8%, and iPad at 7%. It's a striking reality that the Mac, the original core business line, now accounts for less than 10% of their annual revenue.
And supporting all this growth, especially the shift to Apple Silicon and AI, requires monumental investment.
It does. In 2022 alone, Apple spent over $27 billion on research and development, making it one of the largest corporate R&D spenders globally. That spending is what fuels the vertical integration strategy we discussed earlier.
Diving into the specific product portfolio reveals the breadth of the current ecosystem. On the computing side, the Mac line currently comprises 6 families.
The iMac, Mini, MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, Mac Pro, and Mac Studio. And with Apple Silicon, they have managed to differentiate the entire product line based on processing power, from the fanless MacBook Air to the incredibly powerful Mac Pro and Studio.
And this hardware is tightly integrated with their professional software suites.
We're talking about Final Cut Pro for video and Logic Pro for audio, along with their iWork productivity suite. This Pro app ecosystem ensures that creative professionals remain tethered to the Mac platform.
Moving to the mobile side, the iPhone, running iOS, remains one of the 2 major smartphone platforms globally alongside Android.
And its success is what turned Apple into a trillion-dollar company. It continues to define the standards for mobile computing and user interface design worldwide.
And then there's the iPad, running iPadOS. It remains the top tablet vendor by sales, even though its peak sales year was actually way back in 2013.
That's right. But here's the interesting paradox. Despite the devices adopting the powerful M1 and M2 chips, the same high-performance processors found in Macs, the device still faces consistent criticism.
And that criticism centers on its limited operating system.
Exactly. While iPadOS is robust for consumption and basic creation, critics argue it doesn't fully exploit the hardware potential. The software limitations, like restricted external monitor support or the inability to run certain professional development tools, often keep the iPad from becoming a true laptop replacement for power users.
And let's not forget the financial layer, the high-growth services portfolio.
Beyond staples like iCloud and Apple Music, they now include financial products like the Apple Card and the recent Buy Now, Pay Later loan service, Apple Pay Later.
Which allows users to split purchases into 4 payments with no interest.
And they've aggressively packaged all these services through the Apple One subscription bundle. This bundle, offering Apple Music, Apple TV, Arcade, and iCloud storage at a discounted rate, is the ultimate ecosystem lock-in mechanism.
It makes it financially inconvenient for users to leave any single service,
Which dramatically increases customer loyalty and recurring revenue.
This financial dominance is powerfully underpinned by their unparalleled branding and retail strategy. Let's look at the iconography that creates such intense loyalty. The original logo.
Designed by Ronald Wayne, featured Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree that was almost immediately replaced.
By the rainbow apple.
By Rob Janoff's iconic rainbow apple, the silhouette with the bite taken out, used from 1977 to 1999. The design was instantly recognizable, and the bite was included, contrary to popular belief, not as a reference to the biblical fall of man,
But just to make it look like an apple.
simply to differentiate it from a cherry or any other round piece of fruit. Since 1999, they've switched to the elegant, modern, monochromatic logo to align with the minimalist aesthetic of the iMac and later products.
That minimalist design and brand messaging feed into the incredible fanaticism and loyalty the brand enjoys.
Former Apple evangelist Guy Kawasaki once described this loyalty as something that was stumbled upon, rather than fully engineered from the start. They've consistently been ranked as the world's most valuable brand since the late 2000s, and the most innovative brand since 2005.
The advertising is a crucial part of the cultural touchstone. Beyond the 1984 ad, the transformative post-jobs return slogan was, "Think different."
Used from 1997 to 2002, which cleverly connected the brand to historical visionaries and innovators. They also frequently used the greeting "Hello," used for the original Mac, the Newton, the iMac, and famously the Say Hello to iPhone launch.
And finally, the Apple stores, which are a major competitive advantage.
Established in 2001, they were designed to improve the retail presentation of their products after failed store-within-a-store concepts in other retail chains.
And they're instantly recognizable worldwide.
No, not just for the massive glass architecture, but for the customer-centric model exemplified by the Genius Bar. That high-quality, high-touch service model has put significant pressure on other consumer electronics retailers, forcing them to improve their own customer support experiences.
Now we transition to the complex architecture of a $4 trillion corporation navigating intense regulatory pressure. This is the constant balancing act between immense market power and necessary global corporate responsibility.
And this begins with the paradox of their privacy stance. Apple has publicly taken a fervent pro-privacy stance, using privacy as a core marketing differentiator from data-driven competitors like Google and Meta.
They implemented encryption on all iOS devices starting with iOS 8.
Right, making it technically difficult, sometimes impossible, for the company to provide data to law enforcement without a court order, especially if the device is locked.
They also introduced technical solutions like differential privacy. For our curious listener, what does that actually mean?
Differential privacy is a technique implemented in 2016 designed to allow Apple to collect crowdsourced data from massive numbers of users, say, to track which emojis are most popular, or to check for common typos, while statistically guaranteeing that individual user data cannot be traced back to them.
So the data is obscured before it leaves the device.
Exactly. It provides a layer of anonymity to the crowd.
But the biggest public privacy move was App Tracking Transparency, or ATT.
Rolled out in 2021. This feature mandates that all app developers must explicitly ask iOS users for permission to track them across other apps and websites for advertising purposes.
And the impact of ATT was seismic.
Oh, completely. It drew heavy, aggressive criticism from Facebook, now Meta, whose business model relies heavily on targeted advertising fueled by cross-platform tracking. A 2021 study showed that only about 4% of U.S. iOS users actually opted into tracking, costing the digital advertising industry billions.
But the reality of their commitment to privacy has often been questioned, leading to legal contradictions.
It has. We know Apple has aided law enforcement in hundreds of investigations by providing access to user data stored in their iCloud backups, which they do control the keys for.
And there's a critical legal distinction in the U.S. regarding biometrics.
Right. The use of biometric authentication, like Face ID or Touch ID, does not carry the same Fifth Amendment constitutional privacy protection as a traditional passcode. Law enforcement can often compel a suspect to unlock a device with a finger or face scan, but not always compel them to reveal a memorized passcode.
We've also seen high-profile privacy incidents undermine their narrative.
We have. In late 2024, Apple settled a Siri privacy lawsuit for $95 million over accusations that they unlawfully recorded private conversations due to unintentional Siri activations and subsequently shared portions of those recordings with third parties.
And even more concerning was the 2022 report that Apple, alongside Meta, turned over user data, including phone numbers and IP addresses, to hackers.
Hackers who were posing as legitimate law enforcement officials using forged emergency data requests. This incident highlights a crucial vulnerability in their internal review processes for these urgent, non-warranted data requests.
Let's discuss their market power, which is the root of many of their global legal battles.
Apple has faced multiple massive antitrust and compliance issues globally, especially regarding their control over the App Store. The European challenges have been unrelenting.
Like the French fine.
For instance, in March 2020, France fined Apple a substantial 1.1 billion euros for colluding with two of its wholesalers to fix prices for Mac products in the French retail market.
And the most famous battle of all, the App Store battle with Epic Games.
Right. Epic sued Apple in 2020 after the popular game Fortnite was removed from the App Store. The removal occurred because Epic introduced a direct payment system within the app that bypassed Apple's mandatory 30% commission fee, what many call the Apple tax.
The legal scrutiny intensified under the European Union's regulatory regime.
It did. In 2024, Apple was forced to make major changes to the App Store within the EU to comply with the Digital Markets Act, or DMA.
What exactly did the DMA force Apple to change?
It forced three main things.
Oh.
First, enabling alternative app stores on the iPhone in the EU, breaking the App Store monopoly. Second, allowing alternative payment methods that bypass Apple's commission. And third, adding a menu in Safari that allows users to easily choose and download alternative web browsers.
But even with those changes, they were still fined.
Yes. Despite these enforced changes, the European Commission accused Apple of violating the DMA in June 2024 regarding the terms for third-party developers, and consequently fined them 500 million euros in April 2025.
And domestically, they faced regulatory backlash over hiring practices.
They have. In 2023, Apple settled a $25 million DOJ case for discriminating against U.S. citizens in hiring by creating unlisted jobs and advertising them specifically to foreign workers as part of their recruitment for PRM applications.
And a PRM application is?
It's part of the process for U.S. companies to sponsor foreign workers for permanent residency. The process requires the employer to demonstrate that no qualified U.S. workers were available for the position. The DOJ found that Apple had effectively manipulated this process to bypass qualified U.S. applicants.
Moving to the supply chain and labor issues, the scale of Apple's global manufacturing is breathtaking, and it presents constant ethical challenges.
The vast majority of production is outsourced and handled abroad, relying on approximately 1 million contracted workers across factories in places like China, Brazil, and India.
The sheer concentration of manufacturing is astounding.
Just the Foxconn-operated Zhengzhou Technology Park in China employs 350,000 Chinese workers who exclusively assemble the iPhone. Managing safety, wages, and working conditions across this massive, outsourced workforce is an ongoing logistical and ethical challenge.
In response to political pressures, particularly regarding geopolitical tensions, Apple has announced a significant U.S. manufacturing push.
This includes a $1 billion fund for advanced manufacturing and the massive $500 billion commitment over 4 years in the U.S., including investments in critical suppliers like Corning Inc., the manufacturer of specialized glass.
We're also seeing a rise in labor organizing at the retail level.
Something that was almost unheard of a decade ago. The Apple Store in Towson, Maryland, became the first U.S. store to successfully unionize in 2022. Additionally, the internal group Apple Together functions as a solidarity union connecting both global corporate and retail workers.
However, the deepest ethical concerns relate to material sourcing, specifically conflict minerals.
Yes. In 2019, Apple was named in a landmark forced labor and child slavery lawsuit concerning cobalt mines that supplied battery materials in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
And this issue resurfaced recently.
It did. In late 2024, the DRC filed a new formal lawsuit against Apple's European subsidiaries, accusing them of using illegally exploited minerals, specifically tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold that finance armed groups in the region.
And Apple's response.
Apple has strongly disputed these allegations, insisting they are deeply committed to responsible sourcing and rigorous supply chain auditing, but the legal challenge remains a significant test of their corporate accountability.
Finally, let's examine their environmental commitments and the practical hurdles involved in operating at this scale.
Apple has ambitious clean energy goals, having achieved 100% renewable energy for its data centers by 2013 and committing to becoming 100% carbon neutral across its entire supply chain and product lifecycle by 2030.
They're also a pioneer in financial instruments supporting this goal.
They issued a $1.5 billion green bond in 2016, the first of its kind by a major U.S. tech company, specifically to finance environmental projects related to material sourcing and energy efficiency. They were also one of the first electronics manufacturers to eliminate toxic materials like PVC and BFRs from their complete product line in 2008.
But operating at this volume means even internal, smaller facilities face massive regulatory scrutiny.
That's right. A June 2024 EPA report cited 19 potential violations at an Apple manufacturing facility in Santa Clara, a secret facility reportedly developing micro-LED screens. The violations related specifically to chemical waste treatment and miscalculating the effectiveness of VOC filters.
Following a tip from a former employee.
Exactly. The incident demonstrates that even a company deeply committed to green initiatives faces intense regulatory challenges and risks in managing the sheer volume and complexity of the chemicals used in cutting-edge R&D and manufacturing processes.
What an incredible, often paradoxical journey we've traced. From a simple circuit board kit priced at $666 to a $4 trillion global powerhouse that now designs its own custom silicon and leads the AI race.
We've highlighted the defining pivots, the move to the graphical user interface, the return of jobs that focus the product line,
The creation of the iPod iTunes digital hub, and the critical, strategically brilliant shift to Apple Silicon under Tim Cook.
And what's fascinating here is how the sheer scale of the company forces it to continuously pivot, not just technologically, as seen with the recent pushes into Apple Silicon, Apple Intelligence, and the launch of the Vision Pro, but ethically and politically.
Their proactive, yet often contradictory stance on privacy.
Their massive $500 billion commitment to U.S. domestic investment and their forced compliance with rigorous EU regulations like the DMA all show a corporation whose operational decisions are now treated as major political and economic events worldwide.
It's the ultimate paradox of the modern multinational, striving for unparalleled design and a seamless user experience, a walled garden of premium quality, yet constantly navigating intense international scrutiny.
Scrutiny regarding privacy, labor practices in its global supply chain, and accusations of monopolistic market power that land them multi-million euro fines.
We've seen Apple commit to profound domestic investment and push cutting-edge AI features to users, even as antitrust challenges mount and global lawsuits accuse them of exploiting resources abroad. So you have to ask yourself, what does it mean for the future of technology and global governance when one company's strategic choices, whether investing $500 billion domestically or deciding which third-party app stores are allowed on your phone, has such profound economic, legal, and political consequences for the rest of the world?
That's the true definition of gatekeeper power, and something definitely worth thinking about long after this deep dive is over.